I'm curious, Moody, you kind of mentioned some of these already, but I'm curious if you have any other sort of critical takeaways for IT executives or CTOs sort of related to your work around this book. I mean, you've already talked about some of them, about making sure that you actually go and, you know, deploy the technology, keep it simple, and actually finish what you're doing. Anything else that comes to mind that you might want to share?
You know, I think there's probably, and this is something I've been thinking about, even writing more about. I'll probably post an article or two on LinkedIn. But I think one of the ideas that came across, and it's funny because as we were writing this, the conversation, the collaboration between Neil and I really, really think it's important that CTOs and CISOs in whatever configuration, some organization, one is reporting to the other. There's sometimes their peers, it doesn't matter. But what's really, really important is that the CISO and the CTO or the CIO really have to have a good working relationship. I think a lot of times there's almost an adversarial relationship. At least I have found where we're not necessarily listening to each other, or one is pounding on the table too hard, the other person is not understanding. And in many ways, part of what made this book so much fun to work with Neil on is that we were actually able to have that kind of conversation. And again, to be able to debate. And I would encourage people in those roles to make sure that you have a really good working relationship, because without that, I feel like the companies are going to just be screwed, quite frankly, if those two teams and those two functions don't have a good, healthy environment. Doesn't necessarily mean, one always agrees with the other, right? It does mean that there's got to be good push and pull. I think that's really viable. And I think an idea related to that is this idea, and I try to reinforce that in the book, is that, don't fall for the compliance checklist, right? Don't fall for just having a compliance-based security program. You've got to think, in this case, you have to think less like an auditor inside the company and think more like a hacker, right? And one of the analogies that I love is, when you think about our own history, the American Revolution, right? In our own history, right? You had the redcoats and you had they had the guerrilla warfare tactics, right? And one group stood in lines, right? The British redcoats stood in lines, they were aiming their guns, and these guys were just getting shot at from everywhere. And I think in many ways, companies, if you're just following a compliance-based program, you are basically like a redcoats, right? You're going to stand in line, you look professional, you look organized, you're buttoned down. Okay, but you have your enemy is taking shots at you from behind you. They're hiding behind trees. They're leading you into a ditch and shooting at you. And I think companies really have to have very much a hacker mentality, because the people you're dealing with, they're not following a freaking checklist, right? The people you're dealing with, they're finding your weakest link. And I think we got to get more organizations to think that way. You're in kind of, this is guerrilla warfare. This is not following a compliance program. So that would be the other vantage point is, this definitely try to focus on the biggest vulnerabilities and the biggest issues that impact you and your organization, as opposed to following something that's just generic and you're just doing it almost in this automatic mode, just to keep somebody happy. That would be my other thing, because we're all limited in time, right? We have this limited time and attention, and I would focus more on that. Those would probably be some of my takeaways.
So you're saying the hackers aren't taking any breaks for tea time?
They are not. No.
I got it.